Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my own little slice of Urgold. It's Tom. How you doing, Tom?
Hello, friends.
Also joining us this week, back on the show, we're glad to have him back, Tyler Emerson of the Scruby and Wells podcast, the man behind Scruby and Wells. Tyler, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on again.
It feels like there should be another of you. So there's a Scruby and a Wells. Like, I understand you made it as a reference to two different people, but you really should think about having a partner in all of this so that way you can constantly answer the question of which one of you is Scruby and which one of you is Wells.
Yeah, it would certainly make the workload probably easier. So
see, there you go.
Not a bad idea.
I'm helping you out, buddy. That's the good ideas I've got here.
Yeah.
All right.
Need my Bill Costello of the Rolling Bad podcast, who does all the work, and James Elric, who just get all the credit, especially Elric. Yeah.
Yeah, what you need is like a Tom, where you do all the work, but then Tom just kind of rides along and takes the credit. That's really what you should be looking for.
I mean, Vince is building this community base. I'm just hanging out. Like, cool.
Periodically causing people to question Vince's sanity of.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Yeah. I make Vince do all the firefight, like, you know, the putting out the fires, like the PR stuff. I am Vince, the eternal thorn in Vince's side.
Yeah, usually he waits till I'm about to like get on a plane and then picks a fight with Games Workshop leadership or something. So I have to be offline for hours. At any rate, let's turn it over to Tom for his one actual job in this show. Tom, what do we got with the news, buddy?
Not a whole lot. So I have a fairly light night this evening. The rumor engine dropped, and it's something straight out of Ghostbusters.
We'll share it up here. Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, this has already more or less been answered, but that's fine.
Oh, has it?
Yeah. Okay, there we go. So this looks like the power pack out of. So I guess I'll openly admit I don't know. I read about this, but I guess I know there's like a wrecked spaceship out of 40K, Aquila spaceship or whatever. Yep. Like I've seen it. I've seen Kenny from Next Level Painting actually paint the terrain piece before, and I guess in this terrain piece, this is like the power pack of the spaceship. Like this is the engine piece or some part of a go-go component that's in there. Something that looks very like this in the terrain piece. Not exactly, but very close.
So they think it's an actual like Aquila ship?
Who knows? The point is it would still be maybe weird. This isn't painted, right? Like this is definitely just the plastic bit.
Yep.
So it could be that this is a piece of a larger thing. Or it could be some other, like they think it's that power pack, but does that necessarily mean that you have the ship coming, or that there's a ship, or that it's part of a new ship? Not necessarily, I guess.
I think it's one of those Ghostbuster things where they trap the ghost in after they've zapped them. I think it's that. Yeah. I think they're expanding their IP. Basically. You've
nailed it. Yeah, that they get into another toxic IP there. They definitely want to ride that Ghostbusters train. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, maybe it's an expansion for their Night Haunt army.
Is that a joke on Night Haunts? Are you answering that conundrum? I figured as much. I did see that go down today. The discussion of whether or not there's an S on the end of Night Haunts. This is where we're at, folks.
There is, if you're in the Midwest North. The answer is yes. Just like there are S's on Myers and Yankees.
Yep, it's all Tyler Mingo's fault.
Yep, thanks, Tyler. The other Tyler. Yes. Yeah. So that was the first one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it is that power pack out of spaceship. Like I know this piece of terrain fairly well. It's actually a piece I really like. And
you hear that, folks? Vince likes terrain.
Well, it's a nice little piece of scatter terrain with a wrecked ship. I have my Warhammer table, even in the fantasy games for years, has commonly had a piece on it that I quite like, with like sandbags around a crashed Lehman Russ. like that old piece. And so, you know, that would sort of randomly show up on fantasy tables. So I always like that one. I like wrecked ships and stuff. Also, those make great basing pieces for like big kits. Sure. So I like anything like that I can use immediately as a base. So sure. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, you could buy a KO ship and wreck it.
Look, I already have plans for that when Golden Demon comes back to the States. I already know that's going to be
I know what you're doing.
I've already explained it to you. Bring it back.
Beautiful.
Give me an excuse to do this piece. It's going to be awesome. Yes. I'm gonna just ruin a $100 kit. So I'm looking forward to it.
It's so true.
So anyway, all right, Tom, back to you. What else we got?
Shadespire is on the way. Main game is dropping for pre-order on the 14th. It should be in our hands by the 21st. The expansions go up on the 28th for pre-order, which are the Iron Jaws and the Sepulchrals Guard. I almost said Stalkers. The Guard, which are the Skeletons, the Death Rattle. On November 4th is when those will drop. So those will be available for those attending Holy Havoc. Expansions come with 60 cards each. Some are universal. What this says to me is that if you want to play Shadespire, you are going to realistically need to buy every product. Because some universal cards will only be available in expansion packs.
Yeah, this is an interesting discussion point. Obviously, this raised some concerns amongst people, right? Because it's like, well, I don't want the sepulchral, a word that I've always hated. They decided to use again. Where's Lord Tremendous when you need him to screw up the word sepulchral? But the this idea that you have to buy all these expansion packs, I know was something that I had felt they were not going to do, but then that's been directly contradicted. So, yeah, I mean, I'll openly admit I don't like that. I'm not jazzed for that. They should make the card packs available separately, so I don't have to buy the models. So, and I don't know that they're not going to do that. I just know that nowhere in the press release thus far was that a thing they're doing. So,
is this a standard practice? Like, is this X-Wing like, or is this Magic the Gathering like, or?
It's X-Wing, I believe. X-Wing does this, where like you could get equipment cards through some of the expansions, even if you weren't running the ships.
Yeah, it's I would call it X-Wing-ish, certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you want to play, you have to go all in, basically.
Well, it's like
if you want to compete,
competitiveness. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you're a fairly casual player and you're just sort of rocking this game around or in a local league, chances are you're fine, right? It's like the way I would put this is like, I think of the people who, when you're playing Magic, which is very much more expensive than Warhammer.
Oh, yeah.
Like people who really want to play like high level competitive Magic, you buy multiple boxes of every set and then you pay for additional individual cards on top of that, right? To get the things you want.
So like hundreds of dollars every 3 months.
Yeah. And my thought is that like, if that's the case, like, okay, we know there are going to be people who want the cards, right? That's a given. You will want the cards without buying the models. I feel that is an easily true statement.
Yep.
Okay. The second that becomes true, a secondhand market appears for this thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And like, if you go to any convention, there's like the card sellers set up who are going to sell you any individual card from anything you want. By the by, like including from anywhere, anytime, anything. They even sold like the individual cards without the minis for the old D&D miniature game, right?
But they're going to be jacked up price wise.
I don't know what they will or won't be. I don't know how they'd price that. I know not like who knows? I don't know.
Shadespire is going to be traveling on seasons as well. We know that. They've talked about that. And so the question is like, are some of these things going to get discontinued or cycled out? Like with each season, are you going to only be able to use like card move sets from that current season?
Well, I mean, on a long enough
timeline. Don't know. Yeah.
Look, on a long enough timeline, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But like that would require like that is such a down the road concern because like would they do it after season 1? No, they're not going to suddenly say like, well, all that stuff you bought, no, you can't use it. I mean, obviously they're not going to do that. That would just be suicide. But and make people, and no one would buy Wave 2. Like that's what they would do. They would just kill their second season.
Right.
But like, sure, if this becomes super popular and 10 years from now, sure, then they're going to be in the same situation where they suddenly need to make hard choices about what do you allow in because the card set becomes too large to control, right?
Yep.
But again, that's so far down the line. I'm more concerned with like just make the cards, kill the secondary market thing, and just make card packs available. It's super easy.
Yeah, I mean, the other concern that I mean, you're still gonna have a secondary market even if they do card packs. It's just it'll make it cheaper.
It would depress. I mean, yes, it would depress the market significantly.
It would still exist though. Sure. But what I would say, and the other thing that that has come out that is not exciting, if it is true, which is I've heard that they are not going to be doing AOS War Scrolls for these guys as heroes. And that apparently came right out of the mouth of Ben and or Pete in the last month or two.
That would be a change.
Which is a change.
A direct contradiction to Nova.
Right. Then that was the point. Is that there has been rumor has it that there has been a change in that design direction, and that they may not be releasing AOS scroll cards for these. And I know that myself and Nico and a number of folks have asked them publicly on multiple occasions, hey, when are the AOS cards coming out, or are we getting AOS cards for these guys? And we've got dead air silence. Like, well, it could easily be addressed.
Look, here's what I'll say. Yeah. Let me jump in here real quick.
Yep.
Because they did address this somewhat at Nova. So let me put a fine point on what they said at Nova.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The issue is this. They don't want to do 5 individual War Scrolls for 5 Blood Reavers.
Sure.
Blood Reaver heroes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so the discussion was around how exactly they Standard Left just answered the comments, but that's where I'm going. The idea was, instead of doing them as in like they said openly at the convention that they wanted to release the scrolls and they were still trying to solve exactly how they wanted to do it.
Sure.
And the running thought at that time, and maybe this is the change you're picking up on, was that there wouldn't be individual scrolls for them. So like,
Sure.
don't think 3 Stormcast, 1 hero, the girl, the
You're
guy.
You're saying like a unit. They're going to release a unit.
Like some kind of War Scroll that represents the 3 of them armed in this way with this set of rules.
Yes.
Right. And how does that go? Maybe. Now that would fit the non-individual thing. And it would also make it a lot easier because they're going to run into real challenges when you come to stuff like the skeletons. Right. Like maybe the Stormcast could have individual hero cards and it'd be fine. But like that skeleton is just a slightly better skeleton. Right. Like you can't have 7 skeleton heroes running around.
Well, yeah. And not only that, like you can't field that, like in a standard 2,000 point game.
Correct.
So yeah, and like some people have said is that the language has changed in around that, and what they've said is that instead you will be able to use these in AOS for the things that they are. So these will be like alternate Liberator models, alternate Death Rattle models.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, they've said that from the beginning. That like initially, when they put the date on it, they said they wouldn't release the AOS War Scrolls for this stuff until after, sometime after the actual Shadespire release.
Sure.
Right? They had never set the timing to be up there. They were very clear about that in Nova. So
okay. Well, yeah, and for me, like that's like I have a lot of games. I like GW's models, but if I can't run these in the other games that I'm playing, I know personally I'm a lot less, like it's a lot more unlikely that I will buy into it.
Sure. I mean, I will say that I'm definitely picking up the Orc box. Okay.
Yeah.
Like regardless. Just because I want to, actually for the purpose they're talking about, that is to say the
alternate.
Yeah, the Ard Boys models are kind of static and kind of like they're good. I like the Ard Boys models a lot, but they're kind of static and samey for a unit of 30.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And so
arms up.
Yeah.
Front. Yes.
Right. But having just having some additional ones to mix in there would be pretty cool, right? It doesn't need to be. I don't need them to all be little individual snowflakes, but just having some extra different Ard Boys in the mix would be very fun. So, Tyler, what's your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, I think we'll see quite a few people who are using them as alternate models. I mean, the Stormcast will work well. You've got a guy with a Grand Hammer, so he can be your Grand Hammer guy. You can plug in the girl for a normal Liberator, or go a hero and the Prime guy. He works perfectly fine as a Prime. And so, yeah, I mean, I think they mostly seem to be designed with that in mind at a minimum. And I think we'll see a lot of people who are using them that way. Yeah, the R boys, they're probably the best example in general right now that we've seen.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't know if it'll make a big difference.
Sure. I think they look great. And my only question with them is, do I do one box or two? That's not like
Right.
I'm,
Sure.
you know, I mean, I have a good number of Ard boys, but I actually ended up by pure circumstance being at like 25. So so now, like, if I get those 4, I'm like, God, curses.
You know what the right answer to that is, by the way?
What's that?
Buy the skirmish box.
I already have 2 of those. Wait.
Oh,
yeah, I don't know.
That's the wizard, 5 Ard boys, 5 brutes.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. No, I don't have that one. I have 2 getting started and 2 of the big battle forces.
Yeah, it gives you like a weird knob, 5 more brutes, just what you need, and
fine. I love brutes,
and 5 Ard boys.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that I would rather have, rather than another 5 random Ard boys, I would rather have those distinct.
Sure, that makes sense. Yep.
Okay. So there's that.
Hey, yes, there's lots of unbuilt boxes.
Yes, there is. What's up, Tyler? What were you saying?
Have you guys got any? So each give me a prediction on Shadespire over the next 6 months in terms of attraction or not, in terms of it picking up steam or not.
Boy, that's a tough call. It depends on how fast we see the other war bands come out and what other war bands come out. We know the Skaven and Fyreslayers aren't far behind. I think that it is an easy game to learn, and it does have a lot of depth in it. I think that a big part of this will be how much do they support the organized play scene. I know that they've said they're going to very heavily support it. I know that a lot of that will actually come in the new year. You know, like that is to say that a lot of that organized play support will get trotted out in the new year. But I think that my personal feeling is they'll coast the first couple months just on initial excitement. Yeah, just like, this is a big new thing. It's a new way to play. It seems like a lot of people are really enjoying it and reviewing it positively. So that'll carry it for a while, right? When you talk about where does it go from there, it's going to, I think it almost completely depends on how much they do what they need to with the organized play scene and make people want to get out and keep playing it. Right.
Yep.
You know, as much as people hate Magic's model or X-Wing's model or whatever,
it keeps the meta fresh.
It's largely driven by a release cycle. It is a hard treadmill to run, but it is one of the things that keeps the game popular.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine them not releasing 2 war bands every 2 to 3 months without, you know, like, in order to keep it fresh. Like, it feels like that would have to be the release rate, is like 6 war bands, or no, I'm sorry, it would be like 12 war bands a year, basically, you know, 12, anywhere between, right? Yeah, anywhere between 9 to 12 war bands a year. Or no, not 9, 8 to 12 war bands a year, basically, is what they would need, I think, to keep it fresh. To keep the meta kind of moving and responding and changing.
There was a question asked of, will we see this stuff in like Walmart and Target and like other game stores? Will we see it in those places? They have said openly that they're trying to put it in those places, but those places are it's very tough for a company like Games Workshop to negotiate getting this box on with in those places.
Yes.
The normal distribution model for the way games are sold doesn't work the same with Target and Walmart and stuff like that. Yeah. And the way that their supply chains work and their cost structures work is complete anathema to normal game retailers. That's why your books aren't normally at those stores and why the local game store model exists. It is a oil and water situation.
Yeah.
And so, but I know for a fact they're trying to negotiate that. They would like to have that happen, but it's very difficult. So
yeah, it just doesn't work with their pricing structure and like the rules and limitations that they put on the retailer.
Right.
Like that wouldn't work for them. Like that doesn't work for Walmart to not post this on their website. You know, like to not be able to sell through their web store, for example.
I mean, there's just all sorts of, I mean, they can do that now, but The issue is more like how it works with the distributors, commitments and legal agreements GW has with its distributor, that's with the middlemen distributors that work with the friendly local game stores, and then what you have to sell at and the agreements they've made. And UK law is very strict about this sort of stuff as to how you can't sort of pick winners or favor the competition. And so that sets up a real problem when you need to try to sell to large big box US manufacturers that require certain amounts of like product they'll buy and put on their shelf, and the cost that they're willing to pay for it. Like, so it's more complicated than just we want to sell our game through you, right? For obvious reasons. I mean,
my wife works at a company that is a major food product thing that has to deal with Walmart. And she, I hear stories of like some of those negotiations and stuff like that. And it'll be interesting, is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, they are who they are, and they know what they can do. So there you go. Tyler, what about yourself? Turn it back around to you. What's your thought? Don't try. I saw you trying to squeak out of answering this question.
Yeah, I'm more excited now than I was at Adepticon. And have yet to play it beyond that demo at Adepticon. It's making more sense, at least in my mind, and probably there's some influence by what's been really cool to see, which is predominantly positive reviews, as you said, Vince, for the initial reviews on it. People outside of the immediate Warhammer community who are reviewing it pretty positively. So that's awesome to see. And just thinking a little bit more about the model, they might. Yeah, it seems like they have some potential for something here. Like I was thinking about my local store, Metagames, and it often seems that Metagames, it's a big store, it's an amazing store. It often seems like it is largely supported by Magic the Gathering and the business model of Magic the Gathering. Yes. And I wonder to what degree that's true of many FLGSs around the country.
It is largely true of most FLGSs.
Those stores stay open because of collectible card games.
Although I will also say that in the past 5 years, board games have become an increasing share of most of these FLGS's revenue stream as well.
Right. Yeah, with the rise of
takes too much space. Yeah.
So anyway, just wondering to what degree, like, were they thinking about aligning interest incentives with the FLGS structure and the nature of this game, and then looking to pursue efforts that could increase the interest, the engagement of FLGS, to support it, to back it, and a model that could align them in that regard, similar to Magic with Friday Night Magic. I'm sure that they have a Saturday Shade Spy or something in the works that's going to be a part of their organized play. But yeah, I'm really hopeful for it. I'm excited to try it out, and would really love to see it pick up. I have no idea whether the idea that this will translate to a meaningful number of new 40K and Age of Sigmar players. I have no idea on that.
I mean, it is another entrance ramp, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this is the much smaller, like, there's the shorter time, but there's also the smaller space aspect. Like, you could play this on your lunch break at work or whatever, much easier. You could, or something like that. Like, the point being is that there hasn't been a way to deploy that thing, and if it starts, there's a little subtle thing that happens when that stuff starts sneaking around into common society, where you don't have to go to a different place. Because this is sort of an interesting thing about Warhammer. Warhammer requires so much space. Most miniature war games do in general, like requiring like a 3x3, 4x6, somewhere in that space, table plus terrain plus a lot of minis. Is that they're naturally segmented in society.
You have to play them somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. And those places are generally out of sight of people who don't interact with this world. Okay. But when I used to work for like a very, very large company with 13,000 people in a single office building, when I would go down into the lunchroom, there would be people playing, like, there were people at tables playing Magic. Okay. Like, that was happening. It's corporate America.
That's part of the lunch, yes.
Yeah, just like they're on their lunch, they're playing Magic. Just like you'd see people playing normal card games, right? Like you'd see people rolling some euchre or something.
My favorite stories of this is Settlers of Catan. So it happened to where a lot of sports teams, this became popular in locker rooms in the U.S. for, I don't know to what degree it is now, but there's a period where it snowballed for a little while there, and imitation was happening, and so more teams were doing because they were hearing about it, and it was the hot thing for a little while. So anyway, that's a really great point.
Yeah. Once it's actually put into the eye and it's of everybody where they just sort of brush by and encounter it and it's not weird.
And they'll be like, oh, that's sweet. Oh, you painted that? Right. So then it has that draw that Warhammer normally does.
Yeah. So, and I'm not saying this suddenly incites some big cultural revolution where suddenly miniature wargaming is accepted and not weird, right? I just had this conversation. I've been away on business since Monday. I just got back tonight, and like somebody asked me about this conversation came up, and it's always weird to explain to normies this hobby. I mean, that is simply a reality because they have no context for it.
Right.
It's so true. It's like so true.
If I said I play Call of Duty regularly, nobody would think that was weird. Everybody would be like, because everybody has encountered a video game in their life. They have an opinion on it or whatever, but they're like, oh, cool, that's fine. Yeah, it's a video game. It's everywhere, right? Yeah. But most people have. It's not just that this is weird and sectioned off. It's that I've never encountered it.
Yeah. Yep.
Period.
Yeah, I love having that conversation around our lunch table for like amongst the other like PhD folks. They're like, you do what? I'm like, yeah, I do a little plastic doll. I paint up a bunch of little plastic characters and move around a table and roll some dice.
Yes.
And they're like, and you travel for this? Yeah, I do that.
Good times. All right. So what do we got next? I know what's next.
Do you know what's next?
I know what's next.
I
gotta take a drink because I'm about to have a long period of talking. Go ahead, Tom.
So, personality within our community likes to kick beehives.
Hello, Pot. My name is Kettle. Go ahead. Continue your Ben Curry. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Vince. You want to do this? Do it.
Fine.
No,
go. It's not unreasonable. I'll go. That's fine. I'm ready to go. I'm chomping at the bit, yo.
Hey, notice I am not the one picking a fight here. Vince,
I'm not picking a fight with Ben at all. Ben asked a reasonable question. Okay.
Sure.
So Ben pointed out on Twitter to foster some discussion, which I think is perfectly fine, by the by.
Foster discussion.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, it's fine. That's the world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Around the Firestorm seems to say that if you want to use the rules, I don't have the text in front of me, so I am paraphrasing. So please give me some leeway.
You may organize your collection by painting according to the, painting all your models according to the appropriate scheme.
Right. That's the concept of it. So if we got a few words wrong, please give us some leeway there. But the idea being, if you want to make your army from Anvil Guard, okay, and use the Anvil Guard allegiance rules specifically.
The new ones
that are in the Firestorm box.
Yep.
That you would have to match a certain paint scheme. And so the question was, is this a good or bad thing or neutral or none of the above? Like what is the thought on this?
And let's be very clear, we answered this back with the Stormcast book. There was a huge debate about this with the Stormcast book back in February, because there was a conversation about like the painting of the chapters needing to be accurate for you to use the rules.
Right. Yeah.
And sure. Ben, let me point out, Ben also drove that discussion.
I mean, it's fine. It's a reasonable discussion to have. So look, okay, I've got a lot to say on this.
Go ahead.
Okay. This has been a thing forever in like, let's not kid ourselves here. Some version of this has been a thing forever in 40K, right?
Yeah.
Like in general, the concept is if you want to be Blood Angels, then you should be, red with some of the appropriate insignias. Like 40K carries it even farther. Death Guard have certain shoulder pads they're supposed to have or whatever, right? And there are color schemes like the Death Lords or whatever look like this, and the World Eaters look like this, and blah, 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 blah. And there's generally a pretty direct color map. Like I can go onto the wiki or into any of 100 places, and I can see the color scheme for any chapter of Space Marines, right?
Yep.
And in general, the sort of assumption is that if you want those rules, you should be painted in that thing. It should look like it. If you want to play Blood Angels rules, you should look like Blood Angels. Now, I will also say they have kind of the idea of successor, whatever they're called, chapters, whatever the case, where you can sort of have your own chapter colors. And the idea is you're sort of a successor chapter of this. And even though you're different, I use the Blood Angels rules and so on and so forth. So there is also at the same time
flexibility built into the system.
Yeah, there's an out there. It's and you know, and I don't want to get into the 40K discussion because this has been something that they've talked about for a long time. Okay. And has been a discussion point. And,
yes.
Yeah. And this is as long as there have been the idea of chapters and that the chapters had ways they looked, this has been part of the discussion. So I'm going to set all that. I'm going to appreciate the history, but set it to the side for a moment and talk about it in AOS. And I will say, as a general rule, as a rule of thumb here, not game rule, I am completely against the idea of paint schemes being a gate to rules. I find it to be, we can now begin this is all my opinion part, and that's fine, but I'm going to explain why I think that's the case. So tuck in, folks. Okay.
Go ahead. You've taken control. Sure.
The reason I find that to be a bad thing, and by the way, like the successor chapters, I think, and that whole idea is there because it's the open admission that this is bad. But the reason it's bad is this: ultimately, a major investment of this hobby is your ability to create, and this hobby is an artistic expression. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a great artist, but it is an artistic expression. And the creation of your individual forces is something that should be very personal to you. If you want to follow the color scheme on the front of the box, follow the color scheme on the front of the box, and more power to you. That is awesome. If you want to do something completely different, then do something completely different. You have bought the models, and now you're going to go into the artistic item to make them your own. And you can create a narrative and you can create a story. The example I gave on Twitter, and by the way, Twitter's like the worst place to have this conversation because 140 characters is not where nuance lives, just to be very clear. Okay. But the reality is that, like, let's take my Iron Jaws. Okay. I will put 1,000 hours minimum into painting my Iron Jaws army. Mm-hmm. That's a real number. Okay. Now, that is half a work year.
Yes, to be very clear, that's 20 hours a week for an entire year.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yes. Like 2,000 hours is a work year.
Yep.
Okay. And my color scheme is what it is. Like it's what, when I thought of the color scheme, it's why I bought the army. It was one of the things that excited me to go play it. I went and bought it because I liked the look of it, and everything came together for me. And I have a story. My group of Iron Jaws, they follow Mork. They like cunning. They're willing to ally with other people who will get them to fights. You know, they follow the Mork side of it. They like punching people, but they like to be sneaky about it. Okay. Hence all, and that's like, I've got my little story. I've got my little characters. I've got all these things that I've converted and stuff like that, or I'm in the process of converting. And if something came out that fit that, like if let's imagine we get the world where there's an allegiance to a Mork Iron Jaws force, right? Yep. Like a Conan Iron Jaws force that aligns. I would like to use those rules. And if they told me that, well, the Mork Jaws, whatever it is.
The Mork Jaws.
Sure. Are all, you know, that yellow paint scheme that I despise. Well, now I have an interesting choice. I cannot use the rules that align with the theme and narrative that I've had. Okay. Or I can repaint my army. Well, I'm not going to do that. I mean, that's obviously straight out and stupid. Okay. Like, let's not even go down that road or entertain that notion. And by the by, you don't need to have spent the amount of time I did to make that a dumb proposition. Okay. Like, I understand I'm taking this army very seriously, and the amount of time I'm spending on it, most people would just be impossible,
right,
to do it. But that doesn't matter. If you invested any of your time into something that you loved and it's your artistic expression, then that's enough time. The bar is that and no more. I don't care if it was 60 hours or 1,000 hours. That's irrelevant. Okay. If the concern here is obviously something around, I suspect, like power gaming, right? Like, I think that's what we're all worried about, the bad actors. The people who would have a force and just chase whatever the most powerful thing is. Or whatever.
Sure. I don't know. You probably don't necessarily... I'm curious. I don't know if those are necessarily bad actors within the context of what's viable within a competitive tournament setting.
Yeah, you're right. I should be very careful with how I color that.
Yeah.
Somebody who is literally just chasing this thing and like jumps from thing to thing and doesn't care at all about the art, or like, I don't even know how to construct this straw man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so okay. The irony here...
I think I know what you're saying, though.
Continue, yes. Like the people who just want the rules because they're the best rules that are out there for that thing.
I don't care. Here's what I'll say. I don't care who the bad guy is here. Assume there's a bad guy we're trying to prevent. Because, by the way, if there's not, then there's literally no reason for this rule. Right? If there's no downside, if there's no bad guy, if there's no bad situation, then who cares? We don't need this at all. We don't need to worry about this. We have to be trying to prevent something to have a rule about it. Okay? So you can construct whatever the behavior is in your mind. Okay? That's like that.
Yep.
But the reality is rules are never going to stop bad actors. And this will actually
That's so true.
Yeah. And this will actually create perverse incentives. Because the person who is this constructed bad actor who's going to chase that, what doesn't care? Look, I can slap out an army in any color you want in 40 hours with an airbrush and some washes. Like, I could
3 color minimum. They can hit your checklist so they can get max points, and they can have whatever color army they want. If it's a Stormcast chapter, they're just going to repaint over the same models.
Yeah, like that is not difficult at all. And by the way, I'm not banging on people who put out armies quickly. If that's where you're, if that kind of, if that aspect of the hobby doesn't hold as much appeal to you, and you do paint your forces super quick into a simple standard, good on you. Great. Keep doing that. Follow your bliss in the game, man. I'm not judging you for that. My point is that, like, that's not a high bar. You haven't stopped anybody from doing anything. You have simply annoyed the most dedicated people in your game. The people who have invested a lot of love into a concept and a theme. And when rules suddenly become available, because we're not just talking about now, this is a go forward thing.
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm going to make a force today based on whatever it is. And when a rule comes up later that looks like that, like, there is certainly somebody who already has an army that is Stormcast aligned with something else. And that's the thing they've been rolling with. Right?
Yep.
Like with Free People or with whatever. Since that first picture in the first book had Stormcast marching beside Free People, somebody looked at that and said, this is what I'm playing. Okay? And if they decided to paint it all in some color, and now they want to use the rules for, I don't remember which one is it. Hammerhall is the Free People plus Stormcast. Sure. And those colors are whatever. I don't care what they are. They're something. And this person happened to do something else. They've played that army for a year. They earned the right to use that. They earned that right the second they built the army and painted it and put it together. That's the bar. Okay. We don't need to introduce any additional bars. You did the work. There is no upside to this. Now, one of the pushbacks I've heard, is that, well, there's a world building aspect to this, right? I agree. And that's why I'm not opposed to seeing Anvil Guard color schemes. Please give me Anvil Guard color schemes in the books. One of my favorite things. Seriously, like I want the color schemes in the book or whatever.
No, like, so the irony of your statement, Vince,
is that there is no hard color schemes in there.
Right. So if you want to organize your army according to how Firestorm has it, according to that thing, you can't do that right now from the book because the schemes aren't in there. You have to look at the art from the boxes of the pre-order armies.
One of my favorite things in the Iron Jaws book and in the Tzeentch book was actually looking through the, like, the pages they have with the little different color combinations. Like the Pyroflame cult looks like this. I love those pages, man. I look at those all the time and draw inspiration. Like I got excited to paint all my Zinch stuff because I saw a color scheme in there that I thought was really cool. And then I kind of modified it and did my own touches to it. But that's what got me thinking. I want that stuff. That stuff is great. And it should be there as inspiration and as a guide and as a springboard to creativity, not shackles. Okay? Like, there is no reason to enslave us to that.
So somebody had posted on, posted, Domus responded to them, and then Landmine, retweeted it. And I retweeted the whole conversation, and it was somebody saying, like, hey, I just bought Fyreslayers. What scheme do I need to paint them in?
Yeah, I think it was Tom Maudsley. He played Night Haunt at Facehammer just recently, and yeah, I saw that too.
And he's like, what? And Domus is like, I hate that this question even exists.
Backing up, so starting from the top, Vince, what's your understanding of what do you think is the intention or are the intentions of them doing this?
Yeah, that's a fair question, because really what this all came off of is a single paragraph, let's call it a couple sentences in this book. And then the answer that was given on Facebook of, yes, we'll enforce color schemes or something this weekend, this weekend's tournament for the
championship
rules.
Green Tea. Yeah.
Yeah. Which really threw a wrench in everything. So, I don't know that they've ever put out a hard, this is where we're going with it. I feel like this is the wrong way to bank this direction. If you're going to tack into these wins, this is not the right way to set your sails.
Right.
Okay, let me start there. What would be the intention? I have no idea.
I do. Okay. If I were GW, I can tell you exactly why I would do this. I want to see. I want people when they roll up to a Warhammer table and they're interested in their first exposure to the game. I want them incentivized and inspired and make connections with what's on the table and what's in the books. So, Hammers of Sigmar are the front and center Stormcast poster boy stereotypical. Vandus can only be run in can only lead a Hammers of Sigmar army. It's in his war scroll now.
Right.
The new chick has to be painted according to her war scroll. She can only be fielded as part of a Hammers of Sigmar force. That is in her rule war scroll. Mm-hmm. I think that these types of incentives are specifically to encourage folks to actually paint the schemes that are in the books. So that folks, as they're encountering a Stormcast army for the first time, they're encountering what the thing is that GW created. Because it doesn't matter how much development went into the IP of creation if none of it actually gets adhered to when paint hits the model.
Interesting. Okay, so
so if I were GW, that would be my impetus for why I would want folks to paint things according to the scheme.
Right. Again, but that all feels so nonsensical to me, because the reality is most people will paint what's on the front of the box.
Yeah.
It's simple logic. Think of the number of Archaeons you've seen. And I've seen plenty of Archaeons. How many of them look like a version off the front of the box?
Most of them.
9 out of 10?
Yeah. A lot of them, yeah.
Because when you're approaching most stuff, it's easier to use the guide. And again, that is fine. I have no problem with people doing that. Please do it. If it's going to help you hobby and get paint on your model, thumbs up, man. Do that. Pick the app. Use the colors. Use the exact colors. Follow Duncan's method. That stuff's all great. Anything that is getting people painting is fantastic in my book.
So it seems there are different issues here. So another issue that overlaps with this, but maybe a broader category, is this question of match play, in particular at tournaments. So you have the painting requirement, and then also you have the rules. And so I don't know if obviously we'll be talking about the rules. I don't know if you guys want to jump into that right now, but that's certainly another big one that you can couple those together. They can also be considered separately. within the context of Firestorm and the intention of Firestorm, and whether this is sound within this context of a competitive tournament landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I've already come out very, very clear on this when we first covered Firestorm and when we first covered these abilities like a week or two ago. I think this is a terrible idea for general implementation. Just utterly terrible for a variety of reasons. Not the least of which is that there is 1 chaos, one destruction, and 1 death option, and 7 order. So if these are free rules, those other factions actually don't have often, like, there's no Skaven option. If you're Skaven, if you have Skaven models in your army, you cannot use the Firestorm Allegiance abilities.
Real quickly, when you say terrible, Tom, just to be clear, what's the core simple assessment of terrible? What's the reference point? What do you mean by that? What's the reference point?
It is disproportionately incentivizing folks to play order because you get a larger selection, okay? And that it actually can map to a real army. So again, these are free rules. There's no cost for any of this.
Other than minor opportunity cost, but sure.
Other than minor opportunity cost. And so if I play, let's say I'm playing my KO, okay? I need to go find, I want my free rules. I want my handout. I go and I find out what faction can do KO. Awesome. I'll choose one of these 2 options or whatever. Tempest Side just happens to be one of the best options. But sure, I'll do that one. If I roll up to this book with Skaven, you don't have that option. You don't get the free piece of candy.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm much less sensitive to that concern.
Well,
because here's the thing, Tom. Yeah. If we were in a situation of rules equity,
yes,
as it were right now, I might be sympathetic to your position.
Yeah,
but the reality is we aren't even close to rules equity. There are tons of forces you can play with varying amount of rules. Some have only allegiance, some have only this, some have artifacts, and some have magic banners and horns and lanterns and every other damn thing in the world. My point is that, like, we are in a situation of already vastly disparate options.
Right, and the strong are only getting stronger by this.
Okay.
So that's why I was asking about the word terrible as the reference point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're basing
that's the other half of it. Then is that so there's a selection option, and the reality is that there's no cost, and so the already good things that get all the free prayers and abilities and traits for their star drakes and everything else can now choose any of the most advantageous abilities as well. So there's a disparity of opportunity. And in a match play environment, that is poison, because when you have an incentive structure like that, what ends up happening is it'll push it towards, it'll skew the options towards certain factions. It'll skew the battlefield towards certain factions.
Yeah, I've spoken about this often. You know, one of my admitted emotional biases is, and it's a moving target, a desire to see some platonic ideal of healthy competitive viability and variety within that viability. In other words, parity. So you look at the NFL so far after 4 weeks. In football, there's quite a bit of parity going on in the NFL right now, and you know, some fans who care about that, they're very happy, and others maybe not so much. But I'm a big fan of the idea of parity. So when I think about whether something's terrible or not, like, that's my reference point, is this emotional bias toward greater parity, even though it's an understanding that you're never going to get at a platonic ideal. It's always a moving target. Right. Nothing is ever perfect, but don't let, the usual, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. So is that, are you in the same space, or do you think?
Yeah, I think all of that is part of the problem.
Okay.
And then also, I just don't know, like, these aren't balanced. Like, there's no, there's a world of difference between +1, +2, or +2 bravery. First round of combat, +2 or +4 movement, and +1 save. Like, you are in a fucking world of difference with how that interacts with some armies. Okay? Because there are some armies that the game is determined at the top of 1. And if suddenly you can skew it such that you're saving 1 more time, I think about, like, the KO again. You know what? You know what my clown card didn't need? Is +4 movement on all of my ridiculous units, and +1 save, moving it to a 3-up universal save across the board. They didn't need that. Like, it's good. And I'm going to take it because ironically, my color scheme matches with Tempest's Eye. But yeah.
Okay. Vince?
In the end, like I'm not as concerned about it. I think there is an amazing amount of parity right now, more than there has been for a long time in this game.
Sure.
So you're not necessarily concerned about the idea of Firestorm Allegiance abilities being used at competitive tournaments? Or?
I'm not, because I don't think on the whole they're strong enough to actually greatly tilt the meta. That's not going to get tilted back in 3 months with some other new thing that comes out. Like, I think in the end they're a fairly minor incentive to move stuff around like that, and they compared to what's already out there with the options in these various forces, I think they're fairly minimal. Are you not going to run your Sylvaneth? Because there's not a really great Sylvaneth option when Sylvaneth have so much crap already on top of them. Like, they got nothing but stuff. You know what I mean? No.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like
they certainly got a nice option with Living Cities.
Right. Well, it actually strengthened their ally options.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. That's I was just
I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes. You know, so my point is that, like, one, in the end, of course, this is all, we already know what the answer is. TOs are going to make the decision about whether or not they want to allow these rules at their event, and fine. Cool. As a stack on top rule, it's super easy for a TO to cut it out. Like, again, your KO is either they're going to do what they do, and maybe they do this extra thing too. And you'll know that well in advance of the event, right? Like, because the TO is going to say in the rules pack, this is allowed or this is not allowed. Thumbs up. If you want to allow them, I support it. If you don't want to allow them in your event, guess what? I support that too, because you're the TO. Then I support TOs. That's what it boils down to. You get to decide on your event. So yeah, I mean, that's my thought on that. Is that I think the rules wise, it's a fairly non-issue. That will just work itself out. I'm concerned about edicts from them about paint schemes and rules and nonsense like that, because that comes out of GW and seems to have this like effect where once it comes out from the mothership, that it's
unquestioned, it's law.
Yeah, suddenly it becomes a thing. I don't want it to be a thing.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, TOs need to, if that is a thing, then I want to see every TO soundly rebuff it in the same way I just said.
Yep.
You were talking about the 40K example. Jack Armstrong made a thoughtful post on TJ.community sharing his opinions on the painting subject. Pointing out, and others may have pointed this out as well, but pointing out the key difference in his mind between, for example, Space Marine chapters and, say, Stormcast Eternals is that, of course, you have model differences between Blood Angels, Ultramarines, and others, at least certain model differences. So, you know, shoulder pad differences. I'm not a 40K player, so I'm not familiar with what all they are, but certainly Space Wolves, on average, are going to look different than Dark Angels. Whereas that's not necessarily true with Stormcast Eternals. We have these upgrade packs that you can get access to. It's certainly different though than I think the 40K landscape.
I mean, to a point, yeah, sure. Maybe. Like, yes, there are shoulder pad things, but a lot of those shoulder pad differences, like Space Wolves, are a bad example because they're weirdos. They're weird. Like, their gene seed has drifted far. But like a lot of different Space Marine chapters, especially the less explored chapters, right? The ones that haven't necessarily had big books and releases and stuff. Yeah. They're literally just, they use the same kits. It's the same kits. Okay. And just, you know, these guys are blue and pink. That's not really true. I don't think there is a blue and pink chapter, but you get the idea, right? Like, I'm purposely trying to pick something that doesn't exist. I'm sure somebody will link me to the blue and pink chapter after the show. But like, that's it. Now, yes, some have like a distinct unit, like maybe a jump pack troop that's unique to them, or a kit upgrade, a shoulder pad, and you know, a few other things. Like there's chains that wrap around their hands to their guns or whatever. You know, like there's lots of little minutia that can sometimes happen. But again, I'm not sure that it isn't. Like, if you take the core of the conception, which is your basic unit of Space Marines, right? The standard Space Marine squad. That is more or less replicated across the vast majority of the chapters. And what changes is the insignia on the shoulder pad. Yeah. You know, and then the color scheme, right? Like, But beyond that, you could pretty much get those things. Now, there are still some distinctions and things you have access to and don't have access to, even with successor chapters and things like that. Again, there's nuance here that 40K has had time to work through, right? But in the end, it's actually a strength of their IP. They also have a near like infinite number of these things and encouragement to make your own, and also a strong generic, and there's like blah 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 blah. Again, that's why it's not really a direct comparison. So
okay,
yeah. Anywho, and by the way, like again, I'm not opposed to existing color schemes. I like them. I like them going back. My very first army was Empire. I've always had a soft spot in my heart for the Empire, right? And like Nuln had different colors than Reichland or whatever, right? Like this has been a thing forever. It just didn't necessarily. If I wanted to have a Nuln artillery train out of the 6th edition book, it wasn't like I suddenly had to make them one specific color. I just needed to have the right composition of units that the rules told me made it a Nuln artillery train, right? So yeah, there you go. Anywho, all right, have we beat this horse to death?
Yeah,
I feel like we have.
Well, so when I was asking your thoughts on intention. So getting back to Tom's question of, okay, so if I want to have access to the Fyreslayers allegiance abilities, what color should I be? Tom Maudsley, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly on Twitter, Devon's responded to, what color scheme should I be painting? I mean, do you think the intention was to couple those together as a way of reducing the prevalence or the misapplication, what you call bad actors, of just using the rules without having to put additional energy and effort and limitation, maybe in some ways, based on painting the army a certain color scheme to get access to those rules?
I think it's silly because that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah,
like, that's not how incentives work.
Right. It's a solution looking for a problem, and a bad one at that.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go. All right. What else we got, Tom? That's right. We're still in news, folks. This is the largest, maybe the largest digression in history. You want to?
Hey,
I
didn't start at this.
I know.
So Facehammer obviously was this last weekend.
Yeah.
And it went well. 80 folks. It had good representation from a lot of the armies. I don't think Death was up there in the final showing this time around. I think they were missing in the top 10. But Armstrong, which Tyler just name checked a couple minutes ago, won with a Stormcast Vanguard wing.
Yep. Which I think we talked about the last time Tyler was on the show.
Yeah, and obviously I've been pimping the Vanguard wing back when the book came out. We've talked about the strength of this, and it was undiscovered in a sense. But Jack brought that out into the forefront, and he did something that I wouldn't have done initially. I like from my cost benefit analysis, like I would almost always go with a Castellan on foot for the extra +1 to hit because of all the triggering things with the Relictor. Yeah, the Celestin on foot. Sorry, with that and a priest and all the stuff that you can get triggering on higher hit rolls. And he actually dumped the points from that and then the extra points that you had for your other hammer or whatever that was going to be into a Star Drake, which was a great move. Like I think that it's obviously you're paying a cost to get that Star Drake, but now you have two very hard things to move, and both of those are highly mobile. One of those actually hits like a truck as well. Technically, both of them kind of do, but yeah. So kudos to Jack. It was a great move on his part.
They both do not die to most armies.
Yeah, it's true. And I know all about highly mobile 60-ish wound units.
I was joking with Jacob Burleson last night on text that we need to. First joking about I want to get Ben Johnson on the show and go through Ben Johnson list. Get Ben to come on and talk about your triple cabbage and your 4 bloodthirsters, and go through all the different cool lists you can put together. But yeah, we need some Tom Lyons list. And looking get a list going of all the different kind of builds. Yeah, you were the first person that I've seen use that competitively.
But again, kudos to Jack. He played. Having a good list doesn't mean anything. like it kind of does. But having a good pilot is the much more important thing. So having a good list matched with a good pilot is going to win every time.
Because looking at that list, it doesn't seem as difficult to counter as some other, small number of lists that I know of that are out there. Very strong, and I'm sure it's very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I do think that's a really critical point that I would not expect your average player to be able to rock up with that list and do certainly anywhere near as well as Jack did with it.
I mean, one thing that you need to think about with a list like that is that you get to redeploy your entire army every turn.
That's pretty. So yeah, what do you guys say? If anybody, well, you want to real quickly, in case anybody doesn't know the rules of Vanguard Wing and tied with the new fact on jumping out of, you want to?
Yeah, the long and short of this, you have a large liberator block that's part of the battalion, and that they can as their move action be picked up and set up within 5 inches of any of the prosecutors of the battalion. And the big important thing here is that when they set up, it doesn't say wholly within 5 inches. It says within 5 inches, which means one model's within 5. The other 29 liberators that you set up can be daisy chained out anywhere on the board. And let me tell you,
into combat.
So you don't even
need it's a
charge. Yes,
they've clarified that it's a setup. Yes.
Yeah. So and then in that list of like 30 liberators, you have 5 greatsword wielders that are swinging at like 2 damage each, neg 1 rend, and so you have some damage mixed in there. You have a bunch of abilities that are triggering on higher to hit. You have the ability you have a plus to hit from being a liberator when attacking high. So there's a lot of things all working together for that liberator block, and then on top of that, obviously Jack paired it with Star Drake, which is never a wrong decision.
Yeah. Yeah. David Griffin was the very first one to turn me on to that Vanguard Wing, and you were the second one I heard talk about it. But yeah, I was chatting with David on the phone a long time ago. It's interesting that it's taken this long for us to really see it. Now, of course, GH17 was a strong incentive to start seeing it, but yeah, cool list.
Yeah.
I didn't see the second place list. What took second place?
It was Tony Moore with Change Host, the list that I believe Tony took to Blackout and finished second with.
Gotcha. Oh, ever the bridesmaid.
Yeah.
And obviously Change Host is solid. We've talked about Change Host a whole bunch. Bone Splitters had a strong showing up in the top. I think he was number 3 or 4.
Yep, Nikki Myland, who's been doing really well.
Yeah. So which is it's refreshing to see. I was afraid that Bone Splitters took too hard of a hit with this last round of changes. So it's good.
Chris Tomlin, if you're listening, you're the man. Breaking 4th place with Iron Jaws.
Yep.
It's fantastic.
Incredible to see. Yeah.
I'm fully on board now, obviously, with the Iron Jaws. So there we go. Like I support the armies I am playing regularly. So there you go. That's I'm only like that's it. That's where I am. Whatever I happen to be working on or playing regularly at that moment, suddenly I'm all in for. So since the Jaws are the current thing, I will say I've gotten to run in preparation. I've gotten to play them twice now as I build out the army. And I will say I have had some of the most fun I've had playing Age of Sigmar, playing my Iron Jaws. So, they are a really fun force to pilot. Like, they're just silly.
You like to smash things. And
I do like to smash things a lot.
You are a Timmy. There's a lot of Timmy.
Through and through, man. 75% at least. Bare mins, yes. So, you know it.
I will say this. It'll be quite the experience at Holy Havoc. Because our armies, they probably should never hit the field together.
My only regret for Holy Havoc is that I can't double cabbage, right? I mean, that's really the great shame of it. Yeah. That's coming eventually. So.
And you couldn't talk me into also doing Iron Jaws.
It's okay. I'm all right with it.
God, it's so tempting. I played them over the weekend, and they are so much fun.
It really is, isn't it? It's
the
just
models, everything about them. Yeah, I love Iron Jaws.
They're a fun army to play. They're just... There's something about them that just hits the fun button. So I don't know. There you go.
Even for Johnny's, because it's such a great challenge.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Like the list building, especially now that you have allies. Like the allies to me is what calls out to me. And the Sky Basha clan is a pirate like airship Ironjaw's clan that has not been talked about a whole lot. So, and I like their paint scheme. So that may or may not occur in the next year.
Yeah, I mean, allies opened up a lot of options for them. That's what I'll say. Like,
so Spear Chukkas, Doom Divers, or Rock Lavas.
Chukkas every day of the week. Dude, Vince, tell me that you don't want the laser sight crossbows.
Look, the Spear Chukkas are probably the best in general.
They require line of sight.
I understand that, but they are certainly true. But they can, like, a pair of them can often be point click kill a hero. Okay, not every time, but their ability to reroll hits and and have a decent enough rend. They can especially pick off weaker heroes that are dumb enough to get too close to them, right? And their range is pretty good. Like it's not terrible.
Yeah.
Rock lavas are much more are cheaper.
Hit or miss. They're hit or miss.
But they have interesting they are. Yes, that's true. But they have very interesting applications there are particular armies where they will shine. That is what I say. Like rock lavas to me are much more spiky in how useful they are. I think there's lots of games where they'll just generally kind of do not nothing, but be fairly underwhelming for their points, let's say. And then there's some games where they'll just be like the MVPs all the way, superstars of your force. So, I don't know, man. I think if you asked me to choose cold, I would choose Chuck in the void.
Yeah.
How about that?
And what I would say, Tyler, the addition to that is you said they require line of sight. They do. And what that does is give you battlefield control. Because you can now de-incentivize them to move heroes into certain areas. By their very presence, they will push heroes to other areas or become a target. Like they'll become a high enough priority. Now suddenly your Maw Crusher isn't being targeted with the stuff that is like the heavy guns early because they're trying to get rid of your Chukkas. And so so there's a utility even in their deployment.
Yeah, I can see that. I can also see a little bit. A lot of the games I seem to be playing at tournaments run into situations where I'm thankful to have those 2 units of 3 Great Bows, Chronoth Hunters, because they're teleporting, because then I can then draw a line of sight, as opposed to why I think there could be some challenges of running like long strikes in the back without being able to teleport around and get line of sight as much. So in the idea of Rock Lavas is, let's take like Jack's list with that Castellant. With the Warding Lantern, well, Jack is going to be doing his best to hide him, and you can do a pretty good job with blocking line of sight with the Star Drake, or even just Liberators, and I mean a little bit, but especially the Star Drake using terrain. You can do a fair amount, probably block off line of sight from some Spirit Chukkas, whereas the Rock Lavas, you can't hide from it with a 40-inch range. So I just wonder, I mean, I don't know, in a bubble, how many situations are you going to run into at a 5 or 6 game tournament where, you would wish you would have the Rock Lavas because they don't have to worry about line of sight. I do think it's interesting to think about, and they do get +1 a hit against 10 or more models, so certainly, if the fact the Horde meta is going to continue to hold, that's notable. That also stacks with, of course, their 6+ turns into a 5+ to get an extra attack.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. And then a flat 3 damage as opposed to the D3, -2 rend still. So yeah, I think they got some things going for them. Only 100 points each.
Well, and that's why, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I think if you're dealing with, so the Rock Lava's range is also like, let's not underestimate the range of that thing. It's 40 inches.
Yeah.
Okay, like that is a reach out to touch you.
Yeah.
Like 2 of them will often, if aiming at groups of 10 or larger, you will often, not always, but often get 3 shots a turn if you've got a battery of 2 of them, right?
Are they really only 100 points? I thought they were 120.
Yeah.
No, they're only 100.
So you could run 4 of them.
Well, part of the value of, I think, that as well. Yeah, either 4 or run 3, and then you got your Moonclan Grot Shaman at 80, which is very efficient. With what he does, in particular, making Mystic Shield a lot more reliable as opposed to Weird Knob Shaman, a little less reliable, and of course, Weird Knob is more expensive.
Right, and you don't want to be doing that with a Weird Knob. You don't want a Mystic Shield. You want to be footing.
Right.
And so, yeah, like in this situation, I'm comparing like 2Zs to 2Zs because like I'm assuming the bare min here to make this comparison, right? Because you're never going to field them as a 1Z,
right.
because they all want the other one there to give them the buff.
Yeah,
right.
So when I look at 2v2 and I think about that, like targeting, you'll often get 3 shots out of 2 of them, is my point. Like, again, not every round, but often when you're targeting something of 10 or more, because if either of those dice come up 5, which is not statistically insignificant, it's going to trigger a 3rd shot. The shot's basically hitting on a 2, which is pretty fantastic, assuming the crew hasn't gotten wounded out. And the fact that they don't need LOS and have a 40-inch range means you should be able to hopefully protect the crew, right? But like against a unit of, say, handgunners, right? Just having a solid 6 to 9 damage, that's a big hit to them of what's auto damage, right? Like that's because, again, that's going to rend off their armor, and it's just a straight 9.
It's going to straight
rolling
models.
It's
just going to remove
9.
models. Yeah.
But if you're, so my point being is that like there are things where they will shine, but now when you talk about maxing out and going to like the full battery of 4 or something, like if you literally just took it all the way to the 9s and just had like 4 rock lavas versus 3 spear chuckas, because that's really how the math would work out, right? If we're truly spending all of our allies' points on something like this, I would probably take the 4 versus the 3 because like I'm leaving the shaman out. Now I'm saying assume the opposite direction. Just I'm taking everything I can in shooty stuff, right?
Yeah.
I would probably take the 4 lavas. But again, like I don't know where that could honestly run out of targets somewhat quickly. But then yes, I would just start trying to pick off hidden heroes, right? Like just roll the 4 dice at it and see what happens and hope for some more rerolls, and just there you go.
I was thinking a little bit about Iron Jaws after playing them over the weekend, and I mean just a couple of things that stood out as potential, not necessarily assumptions, but predictions going forward about them is that we're going to see less Iron Fist battalions in competitive Iron Jaws list, and that we'll see most competitive lists have some shooting, at least 2 spear chuckas or a couple of rock lobbas. Those were 2 things that stood out. I could be totally wrong on both of those, but just looking at the list, and it's so many points, just as always with these battalions, particularly with elite armies, it's just so expensive. You're losing bodies, you don't have the bodies to lose, and particularly if you want to take some shooting. And so yeah, it almost, like I was looking at Iron Jaw's list that felt a little bit like Sylvaneth, in that you want to do some death by 1,000 cuts, or at least do some damage early game, hold back a little bit, and then play for the late game, play for the long game after you've done some damage with your range. And yeah, I think they can be pretty competitive with that model.
Well, I think the other option is the Gorfist battalion, because it's the one that like Pig got a lot cheaper. I stand behind this battalion. It's expensive as well.
I know.
But if you want to talk about, as we've mentioned many times, the sort of like alpha whatever maneuver, 9 pigs sitting on something is a heck of a lot of wounds. It's pretty tough.
That's a lot of meat.
They're basically happening right away. Like those dudes are just out there. That's a big old move to take before the game starts effectively, right?
That's a lot of models to move.
Yeah, and 9 pigs is 9 pigs. That's a lot of pigs.
And it could be surprisingly good against most things. I mean, it might fall apart against Inch, against Peak Blue and Brim, splitting, and then Mortal Wounds coming away from the backfield. But against a lot of other things, or maybe most of the things.
If they're throwing Mortal Wounds at my pigs.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, that's
awesome.
Yeah, that's
you're gonna leave my Maw Crusher alone? My 2 Maw Crushers?
Right, okay. Exactly. Like those 9 pigs are like 420 points that are 45 wounds.
Look at some Gorfist list here. Haven't put them together yet.
So it's my point is that I think if the alpha thing is if that's your goal, then Gorfist is where you should be looking.
Nice. Cool.
Okay. As a final piece of news that we don't have on the docket, an hour and a half later.
Sure. That's how this goes.
Is that this will segue into the main segment, even though technically it's not main segment time. We have Kenny Lowell is spearheading a dice buy for Fyreslayers.
Nice.
It's like orange fiery dice, and it has like the dwarfy, like one of the heads with like the fire rune in the mouth. of
fantastic
the dwarf.
looking Fyreslayers.
Yes.
They're amazing.
And it looks awesome for my KO Fyreslayer. People are like, it looks too much like KO in the metal, and I'm like, yes, let's do this. I am in. And there's already 1,000 dice being bought.
Nice.
Like on pre-order, and so we are going to get the best price possible for this. So if that's something that you are interested in, please contact Kenny Lowell and get some dice on the cheap. I think they're going to be under 50 cents a dice. Right now, it looks like they may be as low as 40 cents.
I'll put Kenny's Twitter down below. I know he stopped watching because he had to go to bed. So I'll put his Twitter down in there. I'm sure he'll enjoy that.
So after this show, if you are sold on Fyreslayers and you're ready to just go all in, Kenny's the person you need to talk to.
I also wanted to mention Wellesian Wars, right? So I don't want to leave that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. First event hosted by Metagames, Springfield, Missouri. I'm really excited. Yeah, it's a one-dayer, October 21st. We've got 10 people so far, which is a huge accomplishment because I was sweating whether we were going to get 10 people confirmed for a first-time event. We don't have a lot of players in the area, so yeah, we've hit 10, and hopefully, who knows, maybe 16. Get a few more in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, if anybody's interested, just go to Facebook or events. I'll send you the link. You can include it. Wellesian Wars.
Yep.
Players pack have been put together for it, and Jacob Burleson, Kel Thompson, those guys are going to come out for it.
Nice.
Some folks in other surrounding areas. Yeah, it should be a great time.
If I wasn't doing Holy Havoc so close, I would have seriously made the drive.
Well, thanks, man. No worries.
So I will drop the link down in the description. Check it out. I'm sure it's going to be an absolutely awesome one-day event. So if you can in any way make it, I would highly recommend it. There you go. Yeah,
and it's another one of those where the absolute goal is to turn this into a 2-day, 30, 40 player event. And of course, the first one is a springboard or not, depending on how it goes. So, you really want to get a good turnout and get some support built, and then that helps get sponsors and gets the FLGS more engaged, and so on. Everything can snowball from there. It's a really
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's make it a springboard. Let's do it. All right. So let's go to our pick of the week. So Tyler, you're the guest.
Yeah.
What is your pick of the week you would like to share with everybody?
Yeah. So as always, I'm listening to a lot of podcasts. 2 recently that were really good. The first one was the Extra Large Show, the first XL show by Dan Streets with AOS Shorts. He had Sean on he is the top rated New Zealand AOS player who's been playing Stormcast, and fantastic show. So it's Sean's first time doing a podcast, and he is the official Palador Whisperer. This guy kind of blew my mind with his combos for Palador as a unit of 6. So that is definitely worth checking out. Really, really good information on Stormcast. Running some, not the usual builds that we hear about. So that was cool. And then the second one was a Fnatic podcast with Greg Dan, really well-known guy in the UK. He always comes over for Adepticon, big on Horus Heresy. So Greg is doing Fnatic podcast, still relatively new. He had Aurelian, Brad on, and they had a great discussion about match play and all kinds of things. So yeah, I'll send you the links for those events.
Please do. I will post them down below. So after the show, you can go check those out. Tommy, what do you got? What do you want to share?
Mine's going to be related actually to our show topic. And that is, it's 2 things. One is the Fyreslayer Facebook group. If you're wanting to get plugged in with a community of Fyreslayer players that are very committed, many of them have been there since the beginning. Kenny spearheading the movement. We'll point you to that, so we'll have a link below to that. And the other is on TGA. There's a Let's Chat thread for Fyreslayers. And there's a lot of really good information, especially since the GHB2 has been released. There's been a lot of good conversation around like optimization and like what works and what doesn't and stuff like that. And so like take what we talk about here, for what it's worth, but then also go there, and there's a lot of wisdom that's found on those pages. So I'd highly recommend that as well.
Very nice. For myself, I've got a video I want to point out to people, which is, so Eric, our friend from the Mortal Realms, is looking at a crazy conversion project. I think a lot of people are afraid of conversions. I support him on this 1,000%.
No, my was only simply because it's his warlord for Holy Havoc, and And,
no, that's not what I'm pointing to.
Oh, yeah, that's not the one you're pointing to. Oh, no, I thought we were talking about the stiff competition. No, you're talking about the airship.
Yeah, the Drukhari drawn overlords, right?
Yep.
So he's looking at using the Dark Eldar models as Kharadron overlords, like making a whole KO army, but doing it out of converting the Dark Eldar line. So the like Ravagers and that kind of all that stuff, the Hellions into KO, which I actually think is a really easy sort of swap. Like I think a lot of the base skeleton is good there. I think like if you look at the ships, they do have a similar sort of basic conception of parts and where their things sit. The Hellions make good Endrigger / Skywarden or whatever they're called replacements. So, you know, like that kind of stuff is all really solid. But he's doing a series of videos on it. I'll link the most recent one. If you want to see, if you're somebody who maybe is afraid of doing larger conversions and hacking things apart, Eric has a really methodical way he looks at conversions and examines them, and it could be very helpful to your own thought process, to how you approach it. That is not how I approach conversions at all. So
Vince just starts cutting.
Just start hacking, baby. Just hack and know that you can just green stuff it back later. Like, who cares? I'm not going to show it because I'm not going to show it tonight because I'm saving it for the reveal. But you have to understand that, like, I took my Maw Crusher out, looked at the instructions, got a general idea of how to put this thing together, assembled some base stuff, and then just was like, okay, let's start cutting. And just like started cutting just
$120 model. And he's like, man, don't need this.
Don't need this piece. Don't need these other pieces. Like, here's a wing thing that I just hacked off. Didn't need that. That's gone. Get rid of that. That's not doing anything. So, you know, just stuff like that. Like, so you can take whatever road you want, whatever works for you. But
yeah, and you need to understand, like, it's really large.
Yes, my new Maw Crusher he's big. He's real big.
Yeah,
he's bigger than the existing one. Let me just say that.
I've been working on our board, and we were gonna like put an island in the middle of the space, and it was like, oh, it's gonna be awesome. And I was like, Vince, how big is your model? And he was like, it's this and on this base, and then it has all this terrain on it. And I'm like, well, we're not doing an island. We're just gonna put him in the middle of the board.
I'll transition directly to Hobby Time and just say this is the bones of his base, right? Oh, wow. So he'll be up on the arches looking down, like down at that direction, like this, right? And he extends well over the edge of both sides of this now. So, but
that's 160 mil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the pizza tray, right? This is your personal pan pizza tray right here. So yeah. My point is, go whichever direction you want, but don't be afraid to make your models your own. That's what I'll say. So there you go. That segues right into my Hobby Time. This is obviously, I just put the little like liquid gel on it tonight. It's drying now.
Real quickly, Eric had also posted on Twitter, Stonemonk, his Raven swarms instead of bat swarms, which I loved. I thought that was brilliant. I can't stand those bat swarm models.
They're awful.
But I love the War Scroll, the utility in a Death Army, and yeah, using the Ether Wings and some black and spot red and maybe a little bit else. But yeah, I thought that was brilliant. Raven swarm.
Fully support that. Fully support it. All right, so Hobby Time. Let's go over Tom. We'll go in reverse order. Tom, what are you working on? I suspect Tyler's answer, by the way, is going to be he's been working on stuff to get ready for this tournament, because I know TO prep is certainly a lot of hobby prep work.
Oh yeah.
So I finished my last 10 company. They're done, sitting right next to me, based and everything. I finished my frigate, which you might be able to see over my shoulder, right there.
Yeah,
I can see the tail of it. I haven't based it yet. I'm waiting. And so I'll do that again. I'll finish that here in the coming weeks as I'm working on our display board. I wanted to set aside a month for our display board. Over the next year, I will likely be playing some combination of KO and or Fyreslayers. So this is my hurrah. for this is going to be my board for all my events. And it's robust. I've burned myself so many times on this board. Yeah, it's a lot. It's pretty overwhelming. So, and you guys will get to see a little bit more of that in the coming weeks.
There you go.
Nice.
So, Tyler, was I right about your answer for Hobby Time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, getting some more podcast stats, and finally going to be launching here very, very soon. The what I was calling the premium version of the Scruby Wells podcast, but the model's changed a little bit. Much happier with it. So, but yeah, I'll just wait to when that comes out. But yeah, pretty much got everything locked and loaded for that. And real quickly, while it popped in my head, so I wanted to ask you guys, put you on the spot with this.
Sure.
Where the hell are our scheme cards pack? Because I want to use.
Yeah, Vince. Yeah, Vince. Where are they? That workflow is not in my lap.
That's correct. You can blame me for this.
Okay.
And the answer is we'll get you the pack of what it is. It's in a usable state. What I've been working on is trying to get all the schemes are done. I apologize. I mentioned that I just traveled for work over the past couple of days. That I have been spending the last several weeks have been leading up to just little insight into my life. I just delivered maybe the most important presentation of my entire career. That's not an overstatement. It was a month in preparation, and it was a very, very big deal. So it was like a point of professional pride. I had to spend hundreds of hours working on this. This is like something that went to the tops of the top. Like this is CEO level presentation, right? So anyway,
that's awesome.
Thank you. So whatever. I apologize. It has reduced my other time that I like to take to work on this sort of thing. That is now past. I'm done with a long road. So I'm hopeful, but what's been holding me up is getting the instructions for how to use. Does that make sense? Like looking at unpacking, like the call outs,
like
and talking
some ways that you can use these rules.
Yeah, that's been like all the schemes are done and all that's locked and loaded. It's the pack and information around that I'm still working on. So I am sorry for that. You can blame me. I apologize. I will get it done. I will get it out there. I'll get you the pack after the show, Tyler, because it's usable for you. You familiar with them. You don't need the surrounding instructions.
Now, skirmish is completely on me.
Sure. That's
and the reason why, and I'll just be a little bit transparent here. I actually don't like its current state. The framework the rules that we've developed, the current, what is holding it up is simply this. I'm not comfortable design-wise with where we're at, and I don't know where to go.
Sure.
And I don't want to put out a bad product.
Yeah, in development, we found some things we didn't like, some bad consequences, and so we had to go back and re-examine. That's what happens with products sometimes.
Yeah.
There you go. The scheme thing is not in that place. Like the schemes are all solid, and I like where they're at. So,
well, while we're all putting ourselves on the spot, I'll just quickly call out that I'm behind on getting work done for our community project with Chuck and company, and I've got to step up the ball. And so yeah, that's at the top of my mind. Get through this tournament, and going to be getting back to that, hitting that hard.
I am very happy with that because I did manage to finish up the paint.
Nice.
Yeah, TO sort of pack for that. So, and I'm actually super thrilled with how that came out. So I'm hopeful that it will empower a lot of people to run good, to empower TOs with the especially newer TOs with the sort of paint aspect of their tournaments. So
nice.
There you go. That I did get done. Nobody knows that or sees that yet. I did do it. All right. Oh, Jay Thomas says he's given up on that skirmish expansion. That's a good attitude. Just give up on it, and then if it happens, it'll be a complete surprise. There you go. It's the right attitude, Jay. Okay. So let's talk about Fyreslayers, guys. Hey, we started this an hour and a half ago. It's a Scruby and Wells episode, so you knew this was going to happen.
It's getting ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous probably at this point. I feel like clearly I have a high degree of culpability that this does keep happening.
I mean, I'll blame myself as much. I will say before the show started, I actually went and grabbed an extra soda and put it beside me because I was ready. I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. So Fyreslayers have obviously so let's start at the beginning. Obviously, they landed with a bit of a thud. because they were very expensive and they weren't the most compelling in their initial release, points-wise and a couple other things. People like them. There are some diehard adherents. Whatever you think of them originally, yes, indeed. Whatever you think of them originally, and full shout out to Kenny for playing more than like basically 100 games on their old rules and old points. It is clearly a whole new age post GHB 17. We've mentioned them offhand in GHB 17 discussions.
Yep.
And hold on. I just saw something in the comments I want to address real quick. Charles Alexander said the latest rumor is that the Shadespire expansions will be $30 each. If that's the case, I'm happy that it was the amount that I called. If you go back to like last week's show or whatever, I said I think the expansion should be $30. Awesome. Okay. At any rate, I think they have clearly become a force. They have their points got cheaper, their rules got better. They basically moved in both directions at once. I think they have some very compelling options. And so I wanted to kind of talk through those. So Tom, I want to kind of turn this over to you.
Great. And so I have another role.
No. You actually have to do two things in this show. But I mean, I think we should start with saying, how do you, because I know you've had a lot of discussions about them. You've participated a lot in this. What is your current feeling on where they sit? And by the way, I didn't get to look at the lists out of Facehammer. I don't know what the highest placing Fyreslayer list was.
It wasn't real high, all things considered. It was not in the top 10.
I think it was Eddie Mack, Adrian McWalter. I believe he was the highest.
Yes.
Which is interesting. I think it was the first time 80 was running them at a tournament. I don't believe Carl Smith, which is the Kenny Lowell of UK scene for Fyreslayers.
Right.
I don't think Carl was there, and he did really well at Blackout with them. I think he had a top 5.
He did. He had a top 5. I think it was a number 2 or 3, maybe.
Yeah.
I thought it was fairly high. Yeah. I mean, what I would say is that I think that they are. It's a thing. They are going to be competitive. They are going to be, if in the hands, this goes back to that right pilot. So in the hands of a good pilot, I think a Fyreslayer force is going to be a scary thing. I don't think that it's a tier 1 army, but I would put it at a 1.5. And obviously that's like a subtle nuance here. I think that there are weaknesses. I think that...
yeah, I mean, maybe talk about that. So strength, weakness, like break it down. What do you see as they're at the highlights, like hit the high and low lights?
Yeah, so Volkites are your bread and butter at 330 models for 330. They're going to be like, you're going to run probably, you should be running, I would argue from an optimization standpoint, you're going to run shield pick, war pick. And so after the turn that you charge, so on the back end of, like, if you go first on the back end of 1, so the bottom of 1, your armor save goes to a 4-up. So it's not the next combat round; it's turn. So like, which is important because originally I thought it was combat round, so I thought you're going to suffer through 2 combats with the bad armor, but it's literally only the turn that you're charging. And so so you're going to have a 4-up armor in melee in close combat, and you'll have a 4-up ward save, which the ward save gets set on. Like, basically, the ward save or the feel no pain save or whatever, you have a 6 base. If you have 10 or more models, you're at 5 base. If you have 20 or more models, you're at a 4 base. That number is determined at the start of the phase, by the way. It's very important because if you're losing models as the phase is progressing, you retain that save for the feel no pain, the better value for the entire phase, which is really important for them. Because as soon as they drop under 20 models, they don't suddenly drop to a 5-up. They stay at a 4-up the entire time, which is a real big deal. The other thing is that they have rend on all those weapons, 2 attacks each. They are only at a 4-up save, or 4-up attack, which is pretty terrible. But I mean, they'll suffer hard against hit penalties. So Nurgle armies will probably do fairly well against them. And then they also have some mortal wounds output when they charge. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it'll be easy to alpha strike 2 of these blocks into whatever you want, because you'll rune smiter, they'll 3d6 reroll 3d6 charge, drop the lowest, reroll one of those dice into what, and they'll get the 9-inch charge every turn with that rolling method.
How do you get the 3d6? Is that built into the Rune Smiter?
No, that's coming from your general. Like, you're going to run a Kinbad, and the Kinbad's going to go. The general is going to broadcast a bubble of, if any models are within the X number of inches, you're going to charge. You're going to charge 3d6. They have a built-in reroll 1 charge dice. So you're going to run the general up. He's going to be backfield. You'll run him up with his already 12 movement. Get him within range of these models that have just popped up from a deep strike, and then when they charge, so there'll be 3d6, drop the lowest, reroll 1s. If any of the models are within a half inch of a unit, you can direct all the mortal wounds generated from that charge to that unit. So like, you just have to get like 2 models against 1 strategic target, and you're going to drop 10 mortal wounds on them. At the top of that, you're at the bottom of your charge phase, or not mid charge phase, by the way. So like, you could do that, by the way, and kill a bunch of handgunners before they get their stand and shoot or whatever. And so that's just an example. In addition to that, they're going to pile in a 3 plus a D3 inches, because when they're double popping up. So they'll have a really long pile-in reach, and this is going to be important because when they come up, most likely they're going to pop the rune of Farsight or whatever it's called. And it's the most ridiculous rune, by the way. Let me point this out. It increases your throwing hand axes by 8 inches. And when I first saw that, I was like, that is worthless. I am never going to use that. And then it dawned on me that like the Kinbad doubles the throwing axe attacks.
Yeah, heard about that.
And so suddenly your 30 berserkers are throwing 60 axes at 16 inches. So if you pop up with 2 units, you're going to throw 120 axes at 16 inches. You're going to do 30 average wounds to that unit, in addition to the 10 alpha striking mortal wounds, or the charging mortal wounds. So before they touch anything in melee combat, they'll have dished out on average 40 wounds. The 2 blocks will. And so it's going to be ugly. It's going to be gross. Against lists that aren't prepared, they're going to hit hard. Now, well-built lists with chaff, Zinj lists are going to do fairly well because they're just going to repopulate with a bunch of horrors and continue to gum up kind of the way they're going to be able to keep their strategic targets back. So they can't be charged, they can't be engaged, hard and early. Things like KO with high rend range attacks are going to be really brutal against them because they're at that 4 up in melee combat, but in all other phases that aren't close combat, they're at a 5 up. And if you have a -2 rend weapon like KO has an abundance of at range, you're going to shear off their armor save. So they only have their ward save on those KO blocks.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Or on the Fyreslayer blocks. So suddenly, like, yeah, they have a 4 up ward save, but there's only 30 wounds in that unit, and I can already tell you, like, man, I look across my list of KO, like if I have just 1 block of Arcanaut Company with augmented by a chemist, a large block, they will shoot a Volkite unit off the table every turn.
Well, and it's not even that, but like the second they do, as you mentioned, like, yes, it's going to ride for the phase, but the second they do get down below that 20 number, suddenly it's a completely different world for any future, rounds, because the difference between a 4 up and a 5 up on that field of pain, again, when your armor doesn't exist, is pretty massive. And it's just you hit this like circling the drain.
It's a death spiral.
Yeah,
it's like a true death spiral.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're strong. I think there's a lot of good options there. I think that they're going to have to maximize their alpha strike. And if they can do that and do it well, they're going to clean house. If they don't, then they're going to struggle. The problem is that once you deep strike, like all Stormcasts, like once you're there on the table, you're there. And that's part of the problem. Like, you're not moving around, you don't have mobility tricks. And so the reality is that if you're running that, you're going to have, in almost every standard list that I've cooked up, I basically have a 400 point block that I can choose how I want to invest those points. And I waffle in between like having an extra reroll all failed wounds during that first alpha strike, You get that from like the Rune Smiter on Magmadroth. Waffling between that and then going like heavy into like KO, like Sky Wardens or something that has like tons of mobility, tons of ranged reach that could potentially pick off, strategic targets in the enemy backfield. Because that's what you need. You need something that's going to be able to harass or harry objectives. You need something that can snipe those heroes that are buried deep in the lines. Yeah, I mean, I think they're strong. I think that they can be competitive. I think that it's a fun army.
Tyler, what about yourself? Thoughts? Agree? Disagree with those points?
Yeah, some probably more. Just asking some questions and kind of things of Tom. So Battlesmith, do you think there's a role for Battlesmith, one or two?
Initially, I was like, nope, no Battlesmith, waste of points. And then I was like, man, rerolling a 4-up save on all failed saves, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And so he creates this really weird incentive structure, like a cross incentive structure, where if you want to kill him, because if you kill him, you're going to get rid of that broadcasting reroll armor saves. He's like, let me just tell you, I'm going to run that dude forward, and he's in all of my lists at this point. I'm going to run him forward and broadcast this bubble and give all of my Volkite blocks. I'm going to string a tail into his bubble, so everybody's going to get reroll armor saves. And then what's going to happen is you're going to want to kill him, and if you kill him, I'm okay with that too, because one of those really scary units are going to reroll hits and wounds for the rest of the game. And let me remind you, they pile in 3 plus a D3 inches from the battalion. So there's still a super high pile-in unit.
I was even thinking of something cheeky like a Rune Smiter, tunneling him, getting him in front of where you are going to have at least one or both of your 30 blocks in range, and where, so damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you kill him, okay, now you have one or more 30 blocks of Volkites in range to get the rerolls. And if you don't, then they're getting the reroll saves. So I thought that could be something interesting to do to get him upfield where you need him to die or to survive, as it were.
Yeah, he's an interesting. So just for everybody to level set, because not everybody might be familiar with the unit, right? He's a sort of thing that I always loved. Like this is a common trick that a lot of Magic cards did, where he has a function when he's alive, and then once he dies, effectively his corpse. So like his post death has a different effect. He flips, right? So he goes from rerolling armor saves to rerolling hits and wounds when he's a corpse and people around him are angry about his death, which is, by the way, design I love, and I want to see more of that. Don't show stuff like that, Tom. Don't put up stuff. Don't put up
War Scrolls.
Don't put up War Scrolls.
Okay. I just didn't know. Okay, that's fine.
No, it's fine. I and sometimes I don't have a problem with it. It just makes the video get flagged instantly.
Okay.
YouTube has gone insane. But anyways, so it probably already will, just because I shared my screen. Like, I don't know. It's a giant pain. But anyways, yes, when he's alive, he broadcasts this armor reroll. When he dies, he broadcasts hit and wound reroll. That's the relevant part. So yes, he's very compelling as a cross incentive. I agree. And dude's not that expensive either, by the by.
80 points. 80 points. No, the big challenge is that the number of drops. I can't get a Fyreslayer army under 6 or under 5 drops that I want to field. Which, I mean, that's not a problem because all of your key pieces except for your hero is off the table. Because realistically, like, your 2 Volkite blocks are off the table. And by the way, that general is generating a Battle Shock immunity bubble as well, like on top of all the ridiculousness.
Right.
And so, but he would probably be deployed at the back edge of the table, I would imagine. So like if you want to deal with him, you have to really work to deal with him.
Okay, so what about the Orc Hearthguard, the shooty guys?
They're a trap.
Yeah.
A lot of people love them. Love them. Let me point out that they have no additional beard save. There's no ward save there. So if anything gets into them, they explode. They're expensive. They're 5 for 100. And and so the round that you need shooting, okay, your Volkite blocks in the Kinbat are going to outperform them. Because those guys only have a 15-inch range, and they have a max of 60 attacks, where your Volkites that are all popping up, which you're not going to have bodies, like you're not going to be able to get enough things within 15 inches, and you want your Volkites within range. Because if one of these units pop up within range, the problem is that like anything that countercharges them is going to explode. Or like that unit will explode. And so I think they're a trap. They're super expensive. Their shooting is okay. For the money, I would take Sky Wardens almost every time.
Yeah, that was my sense, is that, yeah, you'd be better off looking for the shooting through KO or maybe Stormcast. So the Hearthguard Berserkers, you've got the Broadaxe variety and the Poleaxe. The Broadaxe, the one that 3-up, 3-up, -1 rend, 2 damage. The Poleaxe, mainly they're all about the mortal wounds that they can do.
And the mortal wounds is why you're going to take the Hearthguard. Yeah. And actually, I would argue, no, that's not the only reason why you take the Hearthguard. There's another reason, and I think there's a utility in a smaller unit of Hearthguard, 10 to 15, as like a strategic kind of scalpel for like mortal wounds as a threat, and they don't lose their ward save for low model count, and so they retain that 4-up. They just need a hero nearby them, which you have an abundance of heroes. I don't know if you've figured that out or not, but you're going to have probably 5 heroes in most of these armies, and so you should have a hero nearby them, or you should be able to get a hero nearby them. And then, so they're actually a good, like, they're very Porcupine-esque, like objective guarder. You know, I dropped 10 of those, or 15 of those, sorry, by a 10 or 15 of those by an objective. You don't really want to go into them because they're going to be swinging a bunch of mortal wounds, and they have a ward save.
Yeah, I mean, to me, they're actually a little, like, I don't know if they have the full, I don't know if they have the durability as what I'd normally think of as an objective guarder. To me, they're I agree with you, though, that they're best deployed in that almost like MSU style, because they pack a good amount of interesting O combined with enough D to make them useful in an MSU fashion. To me, they're an interesting area denial flanker, right? They're sort of the little thing that moves around that makes, to me, the way they work is this. If they're sort of in an area, you're forcing your opponent to have to actually commit one of their real power centers to that area, right? They can't just, to dealing with them. They can't just send in a minor thing. Like, often the trouble with little MSU stuff is that people can deploy their other little minor stuff to handle your small units. These are interesting because they can't just use some minor aspect of their army to deal with it. They almost have to bring one of their real power centers to bear. Otherwise, they're just going to feed you. They're just going to feed you those units.
Yep.
Right. So it actually can pull their army apart in an interesting way, especially if they're an army that relies on like
synergy.
On synergy or on melee power to get the job done. Right. Like, again, the ward save that they have is good. They can withstand some shooting, but under combined fire, an army that doesn't have to move to reposition, to reproject its power, right? That just guns left, as it were, is going to handle that easier. But yes, I agree with your take on them.
And what about the Magma Droths? We got 3 options: Rune Father, Rune Smiter, Rune Sun. What's the value or lack thereof, strengths, weaknesses?
So the irony here is that I used to be, like, when I first saw this army, I was like, the Rune Father on Magma Droth, he's the king. And the Rune Sun, I will never run him. And at this point, I'm like, I will never run anything but the Rune Sun.
He's come around.
Just because the Rune Sun, again, like, man, that 3d6 charge bubble that he projects is not insignificant, and those guys don't have a lot of durability, all things considered. They're going to spit out a bunch of mortal wounds, so you don't want, like, they're a very Porcupine unit, like, you don't want to attack them. They're going to spit out a bunch of mortal wounds, but you can actually like equip him to be more ranged oriented, so like the Javelin, which is generally terrible, but it's at least a terrible unit that has a purpose in some instances. And so I would do like a Javelin and then give him like the meteoric hand axe. So his hand axe is always doing like a long range D3. So he has like a couple long range units, and you just keep him behind the Volkites at all points in time. And he's shooting over the Volkites. And if people want to jump behind the Volkites to engage him, they can, but that's kind of at their peril. Because he's not beefy enough in combat to be valuable like that. The Rune Smiter on Magmadroth, that dude's sole purpose is to either be in the bad battalion, the battalion that like gives a +1 armor save, which is awesome, but it's super expensive, and to be a harder to kill Rune Smiter. Or the more normal usage of that guy is going to be he can equip with a key that will let him project all of them can do the Great Awakening. Sorry. Anyways, we're going to do this Great Awakening once per game, and everything within 20 inches is going to reroll all failed wounds. And it's like when they do that, they pop that in the hero phase, but it's a persistent effect. So all of your tunneled units that pop up gain that effect during the first round of combat.
So the once per battle is Fyreslayer units within 10 inches. Yep. And then it has the runic empowerment where you can pick one Fyreslayer unit within 10 inches or 20 inches if it has that forge key.
Yep.
So yeah, reroll, fail the wound rolls for that unit. But yeah, once per game is all within 10 inches.
But if you have the runic key, it's 20 inches, right?
Oh, does it turn the hero phase? I'm not seeing that.
Oh, I thought.
Yeah, I don't think the Forge key expands the Grand Ritual Awakening.
It doesn't really. Okay. Well, which is fine, because let me just say, he'll be sitting as a shoulder to shoulder with the Rune Sun, like when you do run that, who everybody's going to be within range of his bubble for Battle Shock immunity and the charge buff anyways. So you're just going to run them together, shoulder to shoulder, side by side. Sorry, I made that mistake. And so what's going to end up happening is that he'll grant the reroll wounds on all of those attacks on turn 1. And then after that, he can die. He doesn't matter because
you served your purpose.
because after that point, he becomes a sacrificial piece. You're just going to move him in to just spit out mortal wounds on other units. He doesn't matter, because each of those Volkite blocks are going to have their own Rune Smiter dedicated to granting them reroll wound saves or wound rolls. Buried in their huge blocks. So they'll have to get sniped out in order to kill those guys, which it can, but if they're spending attacks on that, I'm okay with that. So because you're going to have 3 Rune Smiters in your army. And so you'll have 1 on Magmatroth, 2 on foot. And so you can get whoever needs wound rolls, wound rerolls, they're going to get that bonus.
Do you think that most lists are going to be running 2 blocks of 30 Volkite or 3 blocks of 30?
I think that some people are going to run 2 blocks of 30 and a block of 2 blocks of 30, a block of 10, or run just 10, and then run a 30 block of Hearthguard Berserkers. I think that some are going to run that. If they do that, you eat up all those 400 points that I had suggested that are the extra that I use for Skywardens. And if they don't do that, if they want to save points, they'll run 3 blocks of 30 Volkites.
Do you have concerns over, we were talking about this and the idea that, all these guys are on basically 32s, and they've actually 90 of these dudes actually has a pretty significant footprint on the table and can start getting in each other's way pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is a huge problem. That's going to be an issue. So wherever you pop up, when you fan out initially, it's going to be real important for you to have space to kind of stretch out. And so anybody that's going to be very aware of battlefield zoning could be a real issue for you, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Especially if you're tunneling up 60 of these models, which is what we're talking about. Now, let me just say, in order to trigger the charge mortal wound thing, you only need 1 model within range in order to spit out those mortal wounds, the hand axes. So I could even see potentially in some scenarios an event where I would pull a bunch of Volkites, retreat them out of combat. I could see in an environment like that just so that I could charge in and redo mortal wounds on a fresh unit from a fresh, you could.
You're saying pull 30 out and bring the other 30 in is what you're saying.
Just to do 3 mortal wounds. Yeah,
whatever the number is that's left, but i.e. pull out block A and run in group B or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Sure.
There's an advantage to that. And let me just say that it's a good thing that this army didn't get. Was it Hearthguard? Not Hearthguard. Which was the one that like has a chance to force the enemy to retreat in the hero phase?
Was
the Anvil Guard? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Let's just say that. Let's be glad that Fyreslayers didn't get that, because they would have forced, like anybody that's touching them, they could have forced them out, and they would recharge and do mortal wounds every turn, which would have just been terrifying. It would have been awesome, but terrifying. So kudos to GW for catching that before it hit, before it made it live.
Anvil Guard, Vanguard Wing.
Yeah.
Yep, sure.
Well, that's still coming. I expect Jack Armstrong this next week to roll up with a Anvil Guard Vanguard Wing.
He's not
an Vanguard Wing. Vanguard
Wing. Yeah. He's not going to be able to make the tournament, but someone will be doing that.
Yeah.
At some point. So yeah. Vince, any thoughts on Fyreslayers?
One of the things we didn't really touch on. There's two other things I wanted to make sure we touched on with these guys. But one thing we didn't touch on, you minorly mentioned their allegiance ability, right, when you talked about the axe throwing. But I actually, quite from a design perspective, love their allegiance ability. It's one of the more elegantly designed allegiance rules that were created. So effectively, there's a suite of runes. Urgold runes is the sort of the background of what's going on here, right? And each one has a different sort of function to it. And the basic premise of these is you get to use whichever one you want in any turn, but once you use it, it's done. Yeah.
Yep.
So, like, there's one that it adds to movement or whatever. You mentioned the axe throwing one.
Yep.
And so they all have different things around hitting, wounding, moving, blah, 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 blah. Throwing axes and stuff. And they all have an interesting mechanic.
Extra rend.
Yeah, the rend one. Thank you. How could I forget the rend one? The amazing rend one. But they all have an interesting mechanic where when you activate them, you roll a die. If you roll a 1 through 5, they activate sort of as per normal. So, for example, the rend one, it just adds -1 rend on top of whatever you currently have, which can be already extremely frightening.
Yep.
But then if you roll a 6 on the die, you get sort of the, I don't know what they call it, infused, enhanced rune effect, whatever the proper name is of it. Yeah.
Super rune. No.
Super rune. Mega rune. And what happens there is, you get some additional effect. So if, for example, in the rend one, to carry on with the rend example, you get an additional -1 rend on top. So you will have people get pushed up to like -3 rend, which is just the grossest thing. Die. Somebody gonna die. Yeah, like a bunch of lunatics with -3 rend. That is slice and dice, baby. Like that is goodbye, good night to whatever you're fighting right there. But it's interesting because it does reward you for when you sort of. I like the fact that once you use the rune, it's done. Yeah, that you can't come back to it. I think it's great. I think that the sort of idea of the activation, the narrative of it's cool. I think the options there are cool. They all fit and have a very distinct purpose. I think they kind of reward a sort of tactical in-game play that I really like, where you're forced to make decisions. You can't just execute plan alpha. I will now go with this strategy. Beep, beep, robot. I hate when armies play like that. With this, you very much have to. There might be one you tend to use on turn 1 or something, but basically after that,
like an axe throw when you pop up from Rune Sniders.
Sure, which is fine. But basically after that, you're going to be making decisions about the sort of state of the game and how it works. So I really love that element of design. That was I think, truly an inspired thing that they added in GHB 2017.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
Definitely. Yeah, it's probably the most compelling example that I've seen of when you choose your own destiny of anything that they've put out so far. And it's strong. But yeah, it's really cool, very flavorful.
So the other thing I want to make sure we touch on is the ally section. Now, obviously, Fyreslayers don't have the longest list of allies of everything. We're not exactly talking about the any order or any chaos here of some of the some other things, but there's what it is. So looking at it, what are your? We've offhandedly mentioned a couple. Tom, you and Tyler, you both mentioned the bringing in the shooting of KO or you know, you mentioned Stormcast.
Let me just say, like, I'm predisposed, obviously, towards KO because
Sure.
I've created a KO army that's themed towards Fyreslayers.
Yep.
So, like inherently, I'm going to be biased towards running KO. But I would say that Iron Drakes are a great like replacement, like a great kind of like unit, you know, range unit if you want some punch. I actually think that as much as I shit talk Thunderers, I think that Thunderers could have a place in a list like this. Even though they're not highly mobile, like you could do a 20 block of Thunderers as your allied unit, all with rifles, like 18 inches. So they're going to be longer. They're going to have more attacks, more, you know, as much rend as your Fyreslayer or a Hearthguard. They're on a 4-up base save, and they can, as their attack, they can retreat out of combat. So they're going to be infinitely more survivable than those Auric Hearth or the Auric Hearthguard. And if you want, like, you could also throw in like the -1 attack, like Fumigator, like just 1 or 2 of those dudes to spread out, so that when you do get attacked, you're going to reduce the number of attacks coming in at you as well. And so, like, you could potentially run Thunder is a good option. I mean, ultimately, not Thunder. Yeah, the Grunstock Thunderers. Ultimately, the problem is this: you don't actually have access to wizards, and that's a problem. Like, you don't have that Mystic Shield, because I can tell you, I want to put a Mystic Shield on one of those Fyreslayer units that are coming in. You know, that are like, or I want to run a Hurricanum behind them. Like, I'm almost willing to give up Fyreslayer Allegiance so that I can have a Hurricanum at the back of those units, hitting on 3s, spitting out mortal wounds. You know, like the incentives that something like that brings is huge for Fyreslayers.
It strikes me as a nice example of one element for keeping them outside of that tier 1, just to assume that you're accurate with the 1.5 into the 1.5 or high tier 2, whatever. You know, missing elements like that can make a huge difference in keeping them reasonable, because they are doing so well in seemingly so many other areas. But Judicators, I think, you know, Judicators are always interesting. You know, I mean, 160 points, 5 with the Shockbolt Blow. I've been looking at them with Sylvaneth, and you know, they do have some limitations, particularly with Sylvaneth, because you're not going to be able to teleport them around the board. You've got a 29-inch threat range, but it's not as good as of course, Great Bows with Chronoth Hunters teleporting them in a 30-inch threat range, where you really can't hide for the most part from the Chronoth Hunters with Great Bows. But yeah, Adjudicators can put out some damage, work really well damned, and great against Chaos. Reroll 1s to hit, which I really love that about them, because obviously we got so much, you know, particular Murder Host, Change Host, etc. within the meta. So rerolling 1s to hit, I think that's a nice element. 29-inch threat range, it's pretty solid. Also, you know, decent wounds.
They're not really mobile, obviously.
That's a limitation. You got 10 wounds, so 20 wounds for 320, and then you've got 4-up saves. So not really mobile, but still 29-inch threat range. I don't know. I think they're interesting.
Yeah, they're a possibility. I hadn't actually considered them. I don't like mixing my Stormcast with dwarves. Like, I understand why they're allies. It's just frustrating to me that they're one of my 3 allies, when aesthetically they don't fit. That said, I'm gonna have some Stormcast allies to my KO Fyreslayer force, because I have some conversion ideas.
I guess a better way to think about this is what do you think? What do you guys think are what do we need to be achieving that we're not achieving within the Fyreslayer legions?
Well, that's why I was going to ask about, as opposed to the Judicators, the long strikes.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
like even more range.
Well, yeah, like the thing I like about the long strikes, right, is so it seems to me that it could be, you mentioned like the change host conundrum, right, of like armies that are going to chaff you and block you and sort of prevent you from applying that power. Something like what the long strike can bring to the table, right, where they do have enough range to reach out and get somebody. I think about that ability to reach over the lines with a fairly powerful shot, right? Being something pretty good to bring to bear.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, 30-inch threat, or 29 or 30-inch threat range.
Sure.
On them. So that's
they have the same, functionally.
Yeah, functionally, but but that -2 rend, I haven't looked at the math on Judicators versus Long Strikes, but certainly, yeah, the potential for mortal wounds. Yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah, against Siege. I don't know. I'd have to look at the math on that, particularly against Siege or even Murder Host, lots of Bloodletters, things that you can knock down or at least cause people to have to use up their Destiny dice to keep their Reward of Change, Gaunt Summon, whatever alive against that. But yeah, I mean, it definitely seems to pair very well with Fyreslayers, the nature, at least what Tom was saying, the nature of Fyreslayers, where it allows you to hold them back. Hold back that Alpha Strike, maybe, if that makes sense, and then wait until you've done some damage. So again, that's why a lot of Sylvaneth build, like I was, the podcast I was talking with Sean Clark. Sean's a really good player, part of Michigan crew. He's going to be at Michigan GT. We were talking about Sylvaneth last podcast, and Sean said, he couldn't get away from the need, he thought, to have at least 2 units of 3 bows. A lot of us, often get so frustrated by bows because they're 4 up to hit, but we need that reach, the potential to that flexibility within Sylvaneth lists. It feels like you often need that to at least be able to compete against a wide range of armies like Chain Chests and whatnot. So yeah, maybe some similar situation. I'm not sure. Yeah, Long Strikes or Adjudicators. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
for me, it is the reason what drew me to the Long Strikes was the rend, right? Because just because something's back doesn't mean it isn't tough, right? That is to say, and like there are things that can fight in the rain that are still going to sit behind the lines.
So for Long Strikes, you're getting how many shots? 2 shots?
3 shots. You're getting 1 shot, one shot each.
Yeah.
So
1 shot each. Yeah, see, for my money, like I would probably buy KO Arcanite Company every day of the week. Because let's be honest, you're going to get 30 models for 360 points. You're going to get 9 shots at 24 inches that are 4 up, 3 up, -2 rend, D3 damage. So you're going to average the same amount of damage, same rend. Instead of that 4 up, 3 up will go to 3 up, 3 up if all those shots are going into a monster or hero. So you're going to get 9 of those shots for 360.
28-inch total threat.
28-inch total threat, right?
Okay.
And you can string those, gunners out. So you can actually like have the block holding a unit and then run the shooters out on a line to have longer reach. Because remember, you have a 30 block of models now that are going to sit, that can auto take you. This is a horde meta, so they can auto. They can drift into an objective and cap it. And then, like, heaven forbid, a unit get within 12 inches of that. Another enemy unit gets within 12 inches of those KO, because they're going to get another 2 shots per model, so another 42 shots, 43 shots. If you're running the for your captain, of 43 shots at 4 up, no rend, 1 damage or whatever. So
sure. I mean, I would point out one minor thing that the Long Strikes can also trigger into mortal wounds.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I understand. Yeah. I follow the math of what you're saying. I'm just saying, like, things that can trigger mortal wounds are mortal wounds. We all know what they do, right? I mean, that's.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I would say that like those 30 models, I think, are more of a threat than the Long Strikes.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see that argument.
So, but that's just what you need: 30 more models on the table. So now you're at 120.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's a thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other ally choices that stand out in your mind? I mean, again, I think that the obvious answer for what they need is that ability to project and handle the things that they can't, that after they've teleported up, they're going to have to run to or fight to, and it's easy to block off melee troops in the end. You know what I mean? Like that you can get in the way.
But, my Nurgle list loves Fyreslayers. Like, it would eat Fyreslayers up.
Right.
Just because it could fight all day against a 4 up profile.
It would be like the most boring, awful game ever, because when anvils fight anvils, defense plus defense equals the worst games ever.
Yes, and so yes, my Nurgle would win that war of attrition. Sure. That's the that's the reality. And so the irony is that the actual counter to the Fyreslayer army that I'm potentially building is the army I'm leaving behind. Yeah. I mean, I would, like, at the end of the day, I think Sky Wardens are actually your best bet.
So I was going to ask, yeah, we didn't go into detail. Why Sky Wardens?
Because they're going to be a 12 move unit. For 400 points, you're going to get, or let's say you're going to do either 2 or 400 is the key, depending on if you want that Rune Smiter on Magmadroth. And so you're going to get between 12 to 24 wounds of these guys on a 4-up save, 12-inch move. You're going to give them the maximum amount of like extra guns. So they're going to run either 2 or 4 of the Gatling guns, which will give them, every Gatling gun is going to give them 6 attacks at like a 4-up, 3-up profile or 3-up, 4-up profile, -1 rend, 1 damage. So you could get 24 attacks out of that. And you're going to get 4 of the drill shots that can do, that are -3 rend. They're like cannons, 4-up, 2-up, I think, -3 rend, or maybe 4-up, 3-up. -3 rend, D3 damage that have a chance of triggering and spitting out mortal wounds.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 24-inch range.
And you're going to get 4 of those. 4 of those shots. And so you're getting more shots than, yeah, I mean, like, and you're getting mobility, you're getting a bunch of shots, you're getting a 4-up save. If this unit gets charged, it can spit out mortal wounds against flyers. When it retreats, which it probably will retreat occasionally, it has a chance of spitting out a mortal wound or 2 from folks it's retreating from. And then on top of all of that, it actually has melee capability. Because those Sky Pikes are still like 4/3 -1 rend D3 damage. And so you're going to have at least 4 of those in the unit. And so like it can do a little bit of, it does exactly what you need to do. Every round, a unit of 6 of those is going to kill a 5-wound hero, mathematically. So every round, a unit of 6 is going to kill a 5-wound hero, or it's going to put pressure on an objective, because it's going to fly out to that objective where you have 5 to 10 guys sitting on, and it's going to start engaging them at 24 inches, and it's going to get 2 rounds of shooting before its Sky Pikes get into melee. 1 to 2 rounds, probably 2 rounds of shooting. And the problem is that if you want to deal with that, those 12 wounds, 4-up save, like they have to send something to go deal with that. And these are a high mobility unit. They can retreat a long way. So you're going to be chasing them probably. And they can keep their ranged effectiveness up by just losing their melee models when they die. And so they can continue to harry and just pull an army apart if you're going to chase them. They also don't, they ignore the problem, inevitably, of having a bunch of 32 mil huge bases, because they're going to fly over your allies.
Yeah, I mean, one can't underestimate that foot move, right? Like that's not nothing. In an army where most of your dudes are running around pretty slow, it's a big deal to have, some kind of mobile force.
You could also give them grapples. Like here's another, but you're going to lose the drills. You're going to lose the drills, which is the problem. And and that's like, you can travel quickly, but you're not going to kill anything. And that's the problem with running. Because those, you got to remember, those drills are the -3 rend, D3 damage that can generate mortal wounds. And so, I mean, you might kill, like, you're going to have to, like, in order for grapples to be reliable, you need to run at least 2. And so you're going to lose 2 drills. So you're trading 1 drill hit every turn, basically.
And to me, the drill is the actual nutcracker. I think they move far enough. I don't think the grapple's worth it. Because I agree with you. 1 grapple does nothing. It's too easy to duff that roll. You need the 2 grapples to push it to like the 75% or whatever.
Yeah, to be semi-reliable. Yeah.
On the Chris Welfare Mortally Wounded podcast, he was chatting. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name now. They had a 7th episode, and they were just real quickly. They were talking about some combos that you could do with like teleporting trees. Teleporting a tree lord angel with Moonstone in hidden ways, 4 inches outside of the enemy units, and then having, maybe you want to get the range, but trying to get in range where you could do that grapnel and then grapple in the Sky Wardens or the engine riggers to have some more punch. Getting into combat or whatnot, do some fun shenanigans like that. Who knows how effective that would be on average at a tournament 5 games, but seemed fun.
I may or may not have some of those shenanigans coming in for Holy Havoc. That may or may not be occurring.
Nice.
All right. Well, there you go. I think that we're going to have to call it there because it is late.
Yeah.
But I think we gave a good run through of the Fyreslayers and talked through a lot of the stuff. So there you go. I hope that was helpful to everybody. Tyler, appreciate you joining us again. You know, this is short by Scruby and Well standards. It's only like, you know, yeah, we still cleared the all important.
It's not even 12 o'clock yet.
Central time. Here it is. But thank you, Tyler, very much. Appreciate you coming on. I hope it was entertaining and fun. I hope you fought some more against the gray and got some models painted. That's always the goal. We appreciate you watching. And as always, we'll see you next Wednesday.